and happy World Rainforest Day, Lucia. Thank you for joining today and celebrating World Rainforest Day right along with me. So delighted that you're here and joining me to celebrate June 22nd, the 4th World Rainforest Day. And, you know, to start off, it'd be so lovely to have you share, why we should be celebrating Rainforest Day, and why should we be celebrating rainforests themselves? What makes them so important in the context of who you are and what you do in the world?
I'm absolutely happy to be here. Thank you for having me. As you know, Rainforest Day is actually something that I really do enjoy celebrating, just by nature of my personal connection to growing up surrounded by rainforests. I grew up in Honduras, which you know, but it's the home of the Central American lung. So we have like a massive rainforest. It's called La Mosquitia, and it's got within it the Rio Plátano biosphere, which is a protected heritage site. And so it's really important for us to really acknowledge the fact that so much of the land used to be covered by forest, and now that's not a thing. And so it's really about reminding ourselves of that connection to, these environments that provide so much for the world. And I have really fond memories of, hiking in La Tira, and basically every national park in Honduras is a rainforest in some way. And so I think that's also been one of the reasons why it's just such a profoundly important ecosystem for me. My cousin got married in Pico Bonito, which is known for its magical waterfalls, and because it's also home to a lot of endangered species in the world. And then within Pico Bonito, there's this river, and it's world famous for rafting. It's called El Cangrejal, and so many of my family vacations were to El Cangrejal. They're almost inseparable. And I remember there's this rock that's many stories high that I used to jump off of and into the river, and then let the current take me, and you could hear animals all around you and the breeze of the trees. And it's just such a beautiful memory for me to go back to. And then I have this one super clear memory of my father, who took me to a place called Cuero y Salado. And it has that name because it's located between two rivers, Cuero and Salado. And it's this surreal wildlife refuge, and it exists explicitly to preserve a natural habitat for endangered species. So it's home to a manatee, it's home to, the jaguars, and it's home, and I've seen a jaguar, which is super exciting.
Oh, wow, I've never seen one.
Oh my God, they're gorgeous. They're gorgeous, and they deadlock your eye, they deadlock eyes at a distance. It's quite fascinating. But to experience it, you actually have to go in a boat down the river through the forest. So you don't actually go into the land, because that's obviously dangerous, but you go through this river. And so any advice for, any person that ever wants to go to this place is keep your hands and extremities in the boat. Yes. Yeah, because I do remember I was letting my hands sort of glide through the water, and then I saw a pair of eyes at a distance, and they were definitely crocodiles. Yeah. So I do like to say I've almost gotten my hand bitten off. So keep your hands in the boat, but really it's quite a majestic place. And, you get to see all these different kinds of monkeys and these jaguars, and these, it's just really, they're home to so many species that it is an environment worthy of celebration. And I'm really excited that we're now in the 4th year of it, and hopefully it continues to grow.
That's wonderful. What it makes me think about is, for those of us who either live near forests or in forests or have seen forests, they're so magical and beautiful. Yeah. And most of the people in the world will never make it there. And the one question, of course, is how do we make it real for folks? We'll get to that in a minute. But what's the most surprising thing about a rainforest for you that you'd like to share with the world? That because we're sort of the conduit, right, for the folks who can't see it, touch it, feel it in the same way. So could you share something?
Yeah, I mean, I knew you were going to ask me this question, and then I was like, I'm going to nerd out on forest facts. And I tried to narrow it down to a couple that I think are super exciting or interesting. And the first is, every time we hear about climate action, we hear a lot about this global temperature issue. And, I don't know how many people know that rainforests can actually help cool Earth's temperature down. And so they really help regulate and stabilize global temperature, which I think is quite fascinating because we've kind of made this like 2-degree thing to be irreversible. And yet we have this entire ecosystem form that can help us address that and help us regulate that. And we're just not really giving it the credit that it's due in its ability to do that. That does certainly help stabilize water patterns. And we are seeing a lot of water-based natural disasters. So, rainforests, they're on land technically, but they have a really big impact on water and just overall temperature. So I think that's super exciting. I was fascinated to learn that, even though they cover less than 3% of the Earth's surface, which is just devastating to me, they're actually home to half of the Earth's land animals, which I find super cool. And now that I grew up around that and I got to see some of these land animals, like I'm telling you, I can never forget locking eyes with a jaguar. It's just ingrained in my memory. So that's something that I think, it's really easy to assume that, land animals are sort of spread throughout, but they're really not. They're in these like really concentrated areas of the world, and we're sort of destroying them at a really rapid pace. That I'm a big fan of beauty products and that I'm like super committed to clean beauty products. So obviously, a lot is said about how, medicine and how beauty products derive a lot of their ingredients from rainforest sources. And so I'm really keen on making sure that the products I buy, either if they are sourcing from a rainforest, that they contribute back to the rainforest in some way, shape, or form and make sure that they're conserved. But actually, cancer medication, I think, has a really high, I think 60% of cancer medication is made from an ingredient with a rainforest.
They originate, and then of course,
exactly. So the percentages of medication are actually really high, and now we're sort of, as we move towards this clean beauty movement, so many of the ingredients being used in our beauty products come from a rainforest. I think that's for all the beauty junkies out there, that's something really important to pay attention to, how it's being sourced from a rainforest, if it's definitely coming from one. And then, there's the one that's really tethered to people, and that's that 1 out of every 4 people in the world depend on a rainforest in some way, shape, or form, be it for food or for generating their income. And that's a really big statistic, 1 out of every 4. And so I think if it's not clear already, the fact that we're losing so much forest land every year, and yet our medication, our beauty products, our people are dependent on them, our temperature, global temperature, our water patterns, all of these things are dependent on rainforests. So I think there's so many fun facts. I could go on and on, but I think I've narrowed it down to these categories just because they really show how important rainforests are to our global ecosystem.
Well, clearly you're passionate, and this is one of the reasons why it's so wonderful to have you as our newest board member for Rainforest Partnership. And, I say it with such great pride that when you joined, you were still in your 20s.
I was.
And then you turned 30 once you were part of the board of directors of Rainforest Partnership. And I love that because it's the way you think and it's who you are in the world and all the things you've done. But one of the things that you're super passionate about and that you talk about, how do you bridge that, has been blockchain. You talk about technology. There's so much gloom and doom about the trajectory that we're on. You already touched on it a little bit, but really we can chart an alternate future for us. And these lungs of our planet, these amazing powerhouses of an ecosystem, can play an incredible role, and technology can make a huge difference. Will you talk a little bit about the role of technology and blockchain in terms of how you see that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, they're absolutely interconnected. There's just no way of separating them, which I think is really important in the way that we apply all of our innovation. I mean, you can have technology, you can have tech-based solutions and systems and all of these platforms and products and services built on a technological infrastructure. But if there isn't a sociological component to it, if it isn't an understanding of how, for example, technology connects with people, then there's really just the existence of these platforms, and then we're death by technological platforms, and we have these products that are never going to be used because they don't really respond to people and people's needs. And so I think they're just like inextricably linked, because if our technology is going to mean anything, it just needs to be useful to humanity. And so on that front, like I really think that that's the thing. And for me, blockchain is extra special because obviously the history of blockchain is protest based. It was a message to, you know, the financial world, and it was saying, you know, you can't be too big to fail, and you can't take it all away. You can't be like an industry that simply takes from people and then never gives anything back, and then when you fail us, you're protected. Like that should not be a thing. And so it was protest technology. And, you know, we're living in this time where it's so essential for us to be able to stand up and say, like, these practices aren't right. And there is no stronger message or stronger challenge right now than the climate challenge. And so I think, you know, to not connect blockchain or technology in general, but particularly blockchain, I think that has this rich history in protest, to something that, you know, requires so much protest because so many bad practices around the world are having such an impact on our environment. I think it's super important for everyone in the blockchain space to sort of figure out the ways in which they can add and contribute to our environment. And, you know, there are many specific ways in which blockchain can contribute. They can, you know, protect scientific research. They can ensure that the spread, you know, that we spread the voices of people that are suffering the impacts of deforestation directly. Like, we want to tell those stories globally. We want to superpower data transparency and consistency so that the scientific community can really tell us what it is that, you know, these best practices are, but then also marry them to these like really ancient practices that respect the voices of local indigenous communities. And so finding ways in which, you know, we have this transparency and consistency of data that's coming from all of these different sources, be it scientific or indigenous, I think is a really powerful thing. And then using other technology, complementary technology, to really make better decisions as to how to protect our forests. And then I think really importantly is, because so much of our modern world comes from an ingredient sourced out of a rainforest, is what are those ways in which we can verify and we can really hold those companies accountable for the ways in which they source their products. And so I think like blockchain can have a great impact on that. We personally do a lot of work in that realm. And so I think it really is, for me, inextricable. And, you know, if anyone in the blockchain community is watching this and they're not already working on an effort, even indirectly, to really contribute back to such an important ecosystem, I think this serves as a call to action, because you know, the deforestation rate is accelerating, and it just has an impact on every little thing in our lives, and we don't really see that. And so this technology can really help us go a long way in making a lot of these processes, a lot of this data, a lot of this research a lot more visible.
That sounds wonderful. I love the passion with which you marry the two. You know, you've talked about many different ways that we can potentially apply blockchain, and I look forward for us to be able to use some of that. And it's so important what you talked about, marrying the sort of indigenous and local knowledge, which we can never be educated enough to really learn what somebody who's grown up and lived in the forest with, you know, generations worth of knowledge, what they have, and then marrying it to this technology. You know, one application of blockchain is, of course, cryptocurrency. Most people don't realize it too. And we started taking donations in cryptocurrency last year. And, you know, that's sort of one little foray for Rainforest Partnership, of course. And you were helping guide that conversation as well. What would you've already talked about a couple of things that you would tell people that they can do on World Rainforest Day. You talked about how you consume your beauty products, and you also talked about lending your talent for blockchain. What else would you share for folks that they can do for World Rainforest Day?
Yeah, you know, for me, it's really interesting because we are, as a company, take on really big and complicated problems. But I think most people have that intention to live cleaner lives, to sort of find a way to help. And very often the problem seems so grand, like so complicated, so large, that we struggle to figure out what individual action we can take. So I mean, on that front, I really think one big piece of it is education, because so much of your life is dependent on rainforest. And it's not until you really start to learn about just how integral it is to your lifestyle, even if you are thousands of miles away, hundreds of thousands of miles away from a rainforest, it still has an impact on you. And understanding the degrees to which that does is a really empowering and enlightening thing that's super important for everyone to do. Obviously, like, donation is ultra important. Like, I really think there are organizations like Rainforest Partnership, namely Rainforest Partnership, that are doing just incredible work to preserve rainforests and to do it in a way that's really just and that is person-centric to the members of the communities that live within these environments. And so I think supporting these kinds of organizations is super important. And I cannot stress the importance of just your consumer choices. Honestly, in this day and age, there's nothing more powerful than exerting your financial control over, companies that are, deciding to do the right thing or the wrong thing. How you choose to purchase really tells them, that it's okay to do things in a certain way. And so, there's a big movement in clean spaces, clean food, clean beauty, clean clothing, etc. So there's really no excuse at this point in time. Like, take a Sunday and look for brands, and then let those become your consistent brands. Like, I'm really, really loyal to a couple of different brands that I know operate responsibly, contribute back to these environments, and that's the kind of consumer I want to be in. So I think, if you walk away from a World Rainforest Day having said, wow, today I learned, that 1 in 4 people depend on a rainforest for their livelihood, then, the next time I go into a grocery store, or the next time I go into a beauty store, or the next time I go into a clothing store, I'm going to make a choice that's going to support these 1 in 4 people. And there's nothing more powerful than that. There's never been a better time to be an individual, because individual action really multiplies, especially through things like social media. So I think, like, those are really simple things, or relatively simple things that a person can do with intention, and that has a lot of impact over time.
That's so wonderful. How wonderful to spend this time with you and sharing the message of hope and what our individual actions can do, and how we can be part of the change that we want to see, right? So anything else as a final word on this wonderful World Rainforest Day?
Maybe go donate and also to share it on social media. I think rainforests need some attention. I have seen this meme circling around that every environmental cause needs COVID-19's PR manager. So I think today it's like on us to be our own PR managers and sort of make sure that the message spreads across social media. So anything you can do to support that, I think, is super helpful. And then never forget to donate.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining, and happy World Rainforest Day, everybody.